Congressman, thank you for joining us here. Curious about what you really want to hear from these executives come July 27.
Well, we've been investigating now in the subcommittee for several months, and what I personally want to hear about are how these large tech companies are using their platforms and if they are discriminating against the customers of those large platforms and competing unfairly with those customers. I think there are a number of buckets of issues that are being investigated right now. Some of the companies have purchased what would be competitors in the marketplace and have stifled competition to their platforms by purchasing these competitors. And I also think that I think a number of members want to learn more about the anti-competitive behavior that we're looking at with the products that these platforms have gone into.
So we have 4 different companies that are in vastly different market areas. Talk to me about a few of them. Most importantly, Facebook and Amazon. Is this an an advertising issue? What really is the issue when it comes to both Amazon and then Facebook?
Sure. So one of the issues with Amazon is the immense share of the marketplace that its platform has, and whether it is using that position to then create competitors to companies that are advertising on Amazon. So if you're selling widgets and you're selling widgets on Amazon, and Amazon is getting proprietary information as a result of the companies selling those widgets, and then Amazon goes out and starts its own widget company and has this competitive advantage because it has gained information as a platform, that's unfair. It may not be technically a violation of the antitrust laws. And one of the things that the Antitrust Committee has to do is to decide what to recommend to the full House in terms of possible changes to the law. So regulators in the past have been reluctant to enforce the antitrust laws against a supermarket that places its homemade or its in-store product in a competitive advantage to other products in the supermarket. This is a little bit different because these platforms are really unique in the amount of the market that they cover.
Have the CEOs of these companies been forthcoming with you throughout the investigation?
We have not talked to the CEOs in the Antitrust Committee. We have talked to representatives of the company, and representatives of the company have made statements that appear suspect right now, frankly. The policy at Amazon is not to use the platform and its position to discriminate against these other companies, and there is evidence that they are doing exactly that. So it's helpful to get the CEOs in, to have the CEOs make a statement under oath and make sure then that in the future, if that is the policy of the company follows that policy.
What bipartisan real changes to the antitrust law do you see as being realistic enough to be enacted next year, for example?
Well, that's a great question. Next year is a new Congress, and we'll see who has the majority, and we'll see exactly what the priorities are for the majority party. But I think it's clear that a number of concerns have been raised about anti-competitive behavior with these 4 companies and the use of the platforms of those 4 companies. And so I really think that this has been one of the most bipartisan efforts that I have been associated with in my 5.5 years in Congress. And I'm very proud that the Republicans and the Democrats on this committee and the staffs on this subcommittee are working so closely together.
There's also been some differing investigations. The Department of Justice has their own. The state attorneys general have theirs. Do you plan to bring cases separately, or would it be better to work together and bring the states and the DOJ together on one case?
So I think we have a unique role in Congress. Our job is not to regulate. Our job is not to shut down companies or to bring companies to court and allege violations of the antitrust laws. Our job in Congress is to make law, and we should be looking at what's going on. These laws have been created for a completely different marketplace. So they were created to break up trusts in the early 1900s. They have been updated more recently to deal with the large telecommunications companies, but they really haven't been updated to deal with the tech companies and the platforms that we're seeing right now. And so I think our job in Congress, we should gather information from the FTC, we should gather information from the Department of Justice, but our job is to make law and to make sure that the regulators have the tools they need to make the marketplace as competitive and really vibrant as possible. The last thing we want is for the tech industry in America to be dominated by a few companies and not have the innovation that we need to compete in the world marketplace.
Congressman, I want to switch gears here and go on over to TikTok. You have a bipartisan bill called No TikTok on Government Devices Act. If it's bipartisan, what's the starting point, I guess, to prevent TikTok from A, getting on government devices and then potentially banning it here within the U.S. altogether?
Well, the reality is that TikTok has an obligation as a Chinese company to deliver information to the Chinese Communist Party. And we need to make sure that federal employees that are receiving devices from the federal government and are conducting business on those devices, whether it's a cell phone or a laptop or a desktop computer, whatever the device is, that TikTok should not be allowed. That app should not be allowed to be installed on federal government devices, so the Chinese government does not receive information about what federal employees are doing. I would like to see, and I think the president has talked about this, a much larger ban on TikTok in the United States. And I think it's important that we have started a letter. I think it will be a bipartisan letter. I think a lot of people will sign on. There's a lot of concern about the theft of intellectual property by the Chinese and the spying that goes on in the high-tech area. And so I think this is something that we will certainly focus on federal devices at first, but you're going to see a much broader effort when it comes to TikTok and other Chinese companies.